On screen with me now is Dr. Jo Jorgensen. She is the presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party here in 2020. She is a third-party candidate. It's important to me that we get a voice out there of a different party than the two that we have that we're seeing bat each other to death. Just to give a little bit of background, Doctor, before I bring you on. Now, first of all, well, I got to ask you that question in just a minute. I just looked at something and I was surprised, but I'll ask you that. You were a VP candidate for the Libertarian Party in 1996. You're a business owner, multiple businesses that you've been involved in. You're a senior lecturer in psychology at Clemson. You have an MBA and PhD in industrial and organizational psychology from Clemson. But I just read, I thought is your residence in South Carolina right now? Is that, I saw a lot about South, it is, but were you born in Libertyville, Illinois? Is that, I mean, come on,
it was destiny.
I mean, that was just, I just saw that before the show and thought, come on, someone is, but that's pretty good, Libertyville.
Yeah, and I grew up in Grays Lake, a neighboring city, but Grays Lake was so small, it didn't have its own hospital, so the one in Libertyville was the closest one. So I think it was meant to be.
And for the listeners, that's just north of Chicago. It's a suburb, basically a suburb of Chicago. That's pretty funny. This is being recorded on YouTube. For anybody listening on the podcast or radio, this can be found on YouTube. All right, Doctor, we have a situation in our country where I have for a long time promoted the idea that we should have none of the above on the presidential box. Here's this candidate, and none of the above, because it's been very frustrating for a lot of us for some time. You end up with, in this country, two candidates, and you have really, you can vote for a third-party candidate. I mean, we're talking to you today, so no slight to you or your party. It is a fact of life. We've had something like 45 elections since the country was formed. We've never had a third party win unless that third party went on to become the major party. Like the Republicans were a third party, the Whigs were prominent, the Republicans won, and they ousted the Whigs. So we've only really had 6 parties that dominated in this country since we were formed. So here we have a situation where you're running for president. It must be daunting. We don't have a lot of voice for third-party candidates. Talk to us about, let's first part of this interview, I want to talk a bit about the whole issue with the third-party candidacy. And then let's talk, I'd love to know about the issues that you guys are putting forth, because I don't think a lot of people really understand what libertarianism is, and I'd like to really clear that up. So first question is just how do you walk into this environment with really no voice for a third-party candidate here in the U.S.?
Well, luckily, social media is helping. As you mentioned, I was the 1996 VP candidate, and we didn't have a way to get around the media. So that is helping, and we are getting our word out. I'm not sure if you knew this, but about 75% of our volunteers are from outside the party. So there are people searching us out. And also, after the presidential debate, the first presidential debate, our website slowed to a halt. There were so many people saying, oh my gosh, is there any other choice out there? So there are people finding us, but you're absolutely right. And we have this additional problem. So in order to get onto the debate stage, you need to get at 15% in the polls. And Gary Johnson got to 13.6%. And I'm thinking this year, well, this is pretty good. We only need to go a little further. I think we can get over that little hump because people are so unhappy. Well, you know what they did this year? They looked back and said, 13.6%, that's dangerously close to 15. So they didn't even put me in the polls. So how can I be in the debate if I'm not even in the polls to get in the debate? And the problem with that is when you're in the polls, then you get more publicity. When they report the polls on radio, TV, internet, wherever, then it would be, Trump here, Biden here, and Jorgensen here. And people would go, oh, wait a minute. You mean there's actually somebody else I could vote for? And then they'd check us out. But right now, if you were from outer space and landed in our country, you would think that we only had 2 people running. Or even in Europe. I was interviewed by a reporter in Europe yesterday who was like, all we hear about are 2 people.
Yeah, it's that way. And for the listeners, Gary Johnson was the candidate in 2000 16,
16.
right?
Yep.
Yep, 2016. And we've done a show in the past. You can go to seanburke.net. All of our shows are there. We've done a show in the past with libertarian candidates talking about this issue specifically and about not being able to get on that darn debate stage. It's supposed to be the bipartisan presidential debate committee. I think that's what it's called, made up of, let's just say what it's made up of, Democrats and Republicans. So it
Yeah,
sounds like.
and I'm sorry, do you mind if I interrupt? And
Please.
furthermore, if you hear debate commission, you hear the word commission and it sounds kind of like some governmental agency that's impartial. No, it's a private organization made up of Democrats and Republicans. So it's their ball.
It's private and funded, by the way. I think the money comes from the network that actually is selected. Isn't that right? How do they get funded? Is that right?
Yeah. Somehow there are corporate people there, somehow it
Donations.
is done through corporate sponsors. And that's one of the things we've been talking about is, hey, maybe we can go to these corporate sponsors and say, hey, do you realize what you're doing? So, yeah.
Wow. So I did a little search. I went to New York Times and put your name in the search box. I did the same thing for the Wall Street Journal. And I got to tell you, New York Times, I don't think I found anything. Wall Street Journal, there was 2 fairly recent things talking about polls. That's about it.
Okay.
The mainstream media has completely sliced this away and is completely now. Let's just and I talk a lot about this on my show. There is big money in politics for the mainstream media, both sides lining up to fight. I personally think they create a lot of the controversy in order to get people to watch, in order to get ratings, and in order to have a lot of money coming in. But they're certainly not going to be interested in a third-party candidate getting into this battle. Donald Trump is such a perfect candidate for these media channels because he makes headlines every day. They just throw him up and everybody watches like there's a train wreck happening and I want to watch that. So he's perfect. So they're not going to want to spoil this kind of golden egg they have there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if it bleeds, it leads. And Trump is right up there with, with his tweets and what he says and what will he say next. So it's almost kind of like having Howard Stern run. Because, yeah, what I remember in the movie about Howard Stern, they said that the people who liked him watched for whatever, like 2 hours. And they said, yeah, what about the people who hated him? And it was something like, well, they watched for 2.5 hours just to see what he says next. So, and I might have those times wrong from the movie. My apologies, Howard. But yeah, it was basically the people who hated him who were listening to him longer just to see what he would say next. And I think that's what we have with Trump. And if they can make news, and that's what's so frustrating. And I've been telling people #fake debates because they're showing all this drama. Biden over here, we've got socialism, we've got all this other stuff. Trump, we've got capitalism and mom and apple pie, whatever. And yet, both of them think that people in Washington should spend our money. Both of them think that people in Washington should make decisions for us. Neither one has an answer to the healthcare costs, and neither one is going to bring the troops home. I mean, really, there's not as much difference between them as all this drama makes it sound like.
No, but I tell you, between social media and the media, there is such a split. And it is so far to the left and so far to the right that I think the people in the middle, the normal folk out there, are so tired of this battle that we seem to be in for so long. It's exhaustion is what's happening. And now I also did a little research, and this is not directed to you, ma'am. This is directed, I think, the listeners. We need to understand this as Americans. Third parties have won around 5% of the vote across time. This is over the research I did. Over the time we've had third parties, 5% of the vote. Only 12 times have they won electoral votes in the presidential, over 45 elections. In 1912, Theodore Roosevelt actually ran in a third party. I'm sure you know all this. This is new to me. He ran with the Progressive Party and actually beat the Republican candidate, but lost to Woodrow Wilson, who was the Democratic Party. And then George Wallace won some states in 1968. He was the third party candidate. but of course didn't win. Now, I have to say in my lifetime, really, Ross Perot was near and dear to my heart. When Ross Perot came on, what was this year?
92,
80,
I believe.
when
Wasn't it
he came,
92?
80, 80, okay, one of those. When he came on, it really woke me up. I loved what he had to say. And here's the danger for you. If you actually did get traction and you were going to dislodge, Ross Perot was on that road. And I remember following it very closely. And I had people in high places that I knew that were backing him, and he backed out in the middle of that race. And everything that pointed to the reason is he had threats against his family that he did not want to sustain.
Mm-hmm.
So he was actually getting to a point where he might have actually been a contender, dropped out because of death threats, and then came back. But of course, by then his momentum was gone. I mean, it would be dangerous for the first third party candidate to really punch through this. It could be a little gnarly.
Yeah, it could be. I guess
doesn't faze you.
Yeah, well, I guess I could say, luckily, I've had no death threats, although that would mean that I'm not a threat to them. So that would be the downside. So, upside and downside to everything. I hope it doesn't come to that to make changes in our country. We'll see.
So how are you finding the mainstream media? Are you able to get interviews, or are you, what are you finding out there?
Well, local media has been great to us when we've been going to the different towns, especially the smaller towns. We've had the local affiliates come out and interview me, and it's been great. But of course, we're not breaking through on the national media. And we've also had local newspapers. They've been great to talk with.
Polling, do you guys conduct your own polls?
We don't. We spend every bit of money we can on advertisements and just trying to get our name out, because keep in mind, some of these states, we've had to spend tens of thousands of dollars and sue them just to get on the ballot. So that puts us at a disadvantage because so much of our money goes towards that. But I was just told that I'm polling in Alaska at 8%, so that's fun. And I can't wait to see how I come out in Maine, because they're the first state, and they'll be the only state this go around in a presidential election to have ranked choice voting. So many times we hear I don't want to waste my vote. Well, I'm curious to see how we do in Maine without that as big of a threat.
Yeah, a couple of things here. Number one, the Libertarian Party, the Republican Party, and the Democrat Party are the only parties on all 50 states plus DC. Is that right? So that's it. So that's very well done from the party, because I know there was probably pushback, and even having that happen, like you said, you had lawsuits against that. Secondly, let's talk about ranked voting. I've actually wanted to do a show on that, and somehow it slipped through. Talk about ranked voting, because I think that is a way that a third party candidate could start springing up in our country.
Right. Well, some people, when I hear this often, somebody will come to my rally and they say, "Oh, I love you, I'm going to vote for you. But my friend who really likes your ideas and knows that Trump is spending way too much money is just afraid to vote for you because she's afraid that Biden's going to win." Or, "I'm going to vote for you, but my friend is just so afraid that Trump's going to win that he's going to vote for Biden," however it goes. And so with ranked choice voting, you get to put who your first choice would be, who your second choice would be, so that, and I'm not sure how many choices they're allowed to give. And I'm sure it would vary from election to election. And I know other countries who do this, it varies. But it gives people the chance to say, okay, you know what? Even though I don't think she'll win, I really want to see Joe as president. But if she doesn't win, then here's my second choice. And then they don't have to worry about, quote unquote, throwing their vote away.
Yeah, and that is the problem. Two things. Number one, if I vote for you, it's not worth anything, people will say. And the second thing is, if I vote for you, it pulls away from maybe some other candidate. It's interesting, Ross Perot, people blamed him for Bill Clinton winning. However, research was done later that it actually came out very even. He pulled from both sides.
And that's what we find too. A lot of people think that we take mostly Republicans, but actually overall we've taken equally from both sides, although most people of course they're either independent or they've never voted before. But it's really funny because when we've asked people to make announcements, or you do this or you do that, and they say, no, a vote for you is a vote for Trump. And then other people say, no, a vote for you is a vote for Biden. So it's really interesting how each side thinks that I'm hurting their side and not the other side.
Of course, they don't want to, any votes at all. We can't have anybody go anywhere. Give me a break. But that ranked voting sounds interesting to me. I do want to do. I've read a bit about it, and it looks like it could have some legs to it. So, before we get into the issues, it's interesting. I've always thought Ron Paul. I think there's politicians out there that are quite libertarian minded. Ron Paul, of course, comes up. It makes me wonder if it wasn't such a politicians thinking I'm only going to have to run one of the main two. Like Donald Trump, when he ran in 2016, a friend called me up and said, why doesn't he just start his own party? What's he doing? And I said, he doesn't need to start his own party. He's going to take over a party. So these people know you either have to go to one of the mainstream parties to win. Okay, so let's back away from that. And let's see if that wasn't the case. I think you would have, wouldn't you tell me, because it seems like there's quite a few politicians that are very libertarian minded. Ron Paul, Rand Paul, these guys seem to be very libertarian minded. And also I've read that a lot of Republicans fled the Republican Party to the Libertarian Party when Donald Trump was elected. So let's say there was a little bit more parity. Do you feel you would have, the Libertarian Party would have some of these people we hear in the news now probably as part of their party?
You mean if people heard about us, would they come to our party?
Well, not so much that. If it wasn't such a, if there wasn't such a two-party system, if it was a little bit more even.
You're right. Yeah. Because the wasted vote. In fact, I hadn't thought about this until you said it. And I'd like to add two more names. Justin Amash, of course, he now is a Libertarian congressman, switch parties. And then Thomas Massey, a lot of people have been talking about him. But you actually bring up a really good point that I hadn't thought of before, because if you think about it, within the Republican Party, they're kind of themselves saying, well, we don't want the Democrats to get anywhere, so we better, stay here. So the wasted vote syndrome is actually happening within the party as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could see that someone like Rand Paul might be a libertarian candidate if it was more even, if it's possible that he could actually win running along that in his mind. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the issues for you. I'm interested for people to understand the difference between Libertarian Party and the two other main parties. I don't think people really understand what libertarianism is. Can you give us that thumbnail elevator pitch of what is libertarianism?
Well, I tell people that you know best what's best for you, for your family. You can make better decisions. You can spend money better than any politician, special interest, or bureaucrat in Washington can. However, that's not what the Democrats and Republicans think. My longer answer, and I think this is a really good example of the real difference between us and them, is the way our system is now, both Democrats and Republicans. Let's say in education, let's say you want prayer in your school. You want to send your kid to a school with prayer or vaccines or whatever. And let's say your neighbor doesn't. Right now, you have to battle it out. And by the way, this is why I think our country is getting so divided. You have to battle it out. You each have to support your own candidate. You got to make donations, put out yard signs, get all your friends to vote for your candidate. And then on election day, one of you is going to win and one of you is going to lose. And it's going to be a one size fits all. The Libertarian Party, however, believes that you should keep your resources. And if you want to send your kid to a school with prayer, you can. If your neighbor wants to send his kid to a school without prayer, he can. And you can get along. And, I'd like to take this further. I mean, imagine if we all got together to vote on should we all be vegetarians or should we all eat steak? You can imagine what it would be like. And people might say, well, that's ridiculous. But how ridiculous is it that we all vote on our kids' education, on whether or not we get vaccinated, on our health care, on our retirement? How come we all have to vote on what kind of retirement we get? It's ridiculous. And in a libertarian society, you would get to, as we say, vote with your dollars or vote with your feet. You get to vote which school you want. You get to vote which healthcare you want. You get to vote your retirement. You don't have to do a one size fits all from Washington.
Interesting. So another thing I'm not sure people understand is in some cases, the Libertarian Party is more conservative than the Republicans. And in some cases, it might be more liberal than the Democrats. It actually
Oh, yeah.
explain that because I think people don't understand that.
Yeah, well, when I first joined the movement back, and I first heard of the Libertarian Party in 1979. So in the 80s, I would tell people we take the best from both parties. We take the economic freedoms from the Republicans. We believe that you should be able to run a business how you want. We believe that the government shouldn't take all of our money, that we should have low taxes to spur economic development. We take the best side from the Democrats, from the left. We think that gays should have rights. You should be able to marry who you want to marry. We think you should be able to use any drugs that you want. You should be, heck, marijuana is a lot safer for you than most drugs, or I mean, than alcohol. I'm sorry, marijuana much more safe than my drug of choice, bourbon. I can tell you that. So, so. So we take the good parts of the left and we put them together. But you can't say that anymore. We've got Donald Trump who's increasing the deficit at a faster rate than Obama. We don't even hear Republicans, for the most part, talking about cutting spending. And then on the left, even as recently as 2012, we had both Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton saying that gay marriage should be illegal. And the other thing that we took, again, good from the left, we said, yeah, we're also the party of anti-war. Well, that was the Democratic Party of the 1960s. That's not the Democratic Party now with Warhawk Joe Biden and Warhawk Hillary Clinton.
Oh
And
yeah.
from the right, we would say, and we take the best from the right. You should be able to own a gun to defend yourself. And now we've got, Trump with his gun regulations with bump stocks and all that. So we can't even say, I mean, and people in the Libertarian Party are saying, you know what, it's gotten to be like the red team and the blue team. In fact, this would be laughable if it weren't so sad. When Trump was talking about taking troops out of Iraq, the Democrats were going, "Oh no, we can't do that." And it's like, are you listening to yourselves, Democratic Party? So it's no longer here are our core beliefs. Now it's whatever Trump does, we want the opposite. Whatever Biden does, we want the opposite.
It's like it has turned into a giant reality show.
It's not. Yeah.
And not
Yeah,
necessarily to put
good point.
because the president was, but seriously, it's if he opposes it, they want the fact that President Trump is driving up the national debt before COVID. Let's just put in before COVID ever hit us, the national debt. His deficits were outrageous. That just was crazy. All right, so let's hit issues. I appreciate you going through that because I don't think people understand that what you just said. I love that. Let's talk about COVID. What would you have done? What would you do different?
Yeah, the biggest mistake that Trump made was not getting rid of the FDA obstacles that that and this goes back to, why am I running for office? Government is too big, too bossy, too nosy, too intrusive. But the worst part is they end up hurting the very people they try to help. The FDA, it's supposed to be there to protect us. It's supposed to make us safe. What does it do? It's got obstacles that prevent us from getting tested. There were literally dozens of kits that we could have used that were being sold around the world to find out who had the virus and who didn't, who could go back to work, who could stay home. Between the FDA and the CDC, only 2 of them were approved originally. Meanwhile, at the same time, we've got South Korea. They confirmed their case within like a day of our first case, and they quickly jumped ahead in testing, and they were able to contain the spread without even the lockdown. Meanwhile, we've got cases skyrocketing, and we lose tens of millions of jobs. That was a huge mistake. And we had Trump on stage with Dr. Fauci saying, if you don't have symptoms, no need to get tested, even though they knew at the time over half the people with the virus didn't have any symptoms. That's when you need to get tested, is when there are no symptoms, because you could be spreading without even knowing it. So very frustrating to watch that happen, to watch our economy shut down, to watch people say, basically have us all under house arrest where we're not even allowed to go out to work. And let me just quickly add, it was so refreshing to see, the protests in Michigan, to see the hairdresser in Dallas, to see the barber in New Jersey say, hey, this is America. It's supposed to be land of the free. You can't lock us up. We should be able to go to work.
I love it. I've always felt testing was key to keeping us going, and of course we're still not there. I mean,
Oh,
it's
still.
unbelievable. Yeah, still not
Yeah,
there.
about 3 or 4 weeks ago, my communications director called around to see about getting tests, and there were still companies saying, "Nope, we can sell them elsewhere, but we can't sell them in the United States." So,
Amazing.
and at the time in her state, you had to have a doctor's note to even get tested. How come we don't have test kits at every drugstore so that
Yep.
we can all find out if we have it or not?
Yep. Okay. Way too practical, doctor. I'm sorry. That's
Yes.
let's go to healthcare. We know that the left, the Democrats seem to want nationalized healthcare. The Republicans do not. What's the libertarian stance?
If there is one message I could get to every American voter, it's that we do not have a free market system. We keep hearing people say, well, free market didn't work. We're going to have to go to single payer. We don't have a free market system. That's why it doesn't work. And when I hear people on the left say they want Medicare for all, what I'm hearing them say is, we want VA hospital for all,
Mm.
because again, it's a top down monopoly. It worked horribly for the veterans. Why do they think it would work even better for the rest of us? And all we have to do is look at Great Britain, look at Canada, and we see that those systems just don't work. Why not look at a system that does work? For instance, like Singapore or the state of Indiana.
That has they have competition between
Yes,
the
yes. Yeah.
insurance companies. So is that what you're talking about, between insurance companies, or how does the competition you're talking about?
Well, first of all, and the real problem with our healthcare system is that we don't have real insurance. That in any other industry, insurance is only for unexpected costs, therefore costs are held relatively low. And what I've been going around asking people is, what if your car insurance paid for gas, oil, car washes? First of all, you would have absolutely no reason to shop around for the best gas prices. In fact,
Yeah.
you might even go to the fanciest gas station where they serve you free coffee while you wait. Because what do you care? You pay your little $5 copay. It's going to cost just as much to go to an expensive gas station as a cheap one. The
Yeah.
gas stations could raise their prices without you even knowing it, because they just pass along to the insurance company. Then the car insurance company would increase your premiums the next year. And then that spiral that we've got going on is exactly what we have in healthcare. And the only way to put a stop to it is to have people shopping around for prices and causing people to compete on price. And in the state of Indiana, the number of people using generic drugs went from something like 10% to 90% because they got to keep keep the savings. And that's the way it should be. That's the way it is. If you buy a new car, a computer, groceries, you get to keep the savings.
Okay, for those listening, would you not want her on the stage with those two other dudes saying stuff like that? Let's just all cheer. I can hear you out there cheering right now. Okay.
It's funny that you mentioned that. Can I tell you one thing that I haven't talked about much, because I don't think to mention this? My local media was very good to me when I ran for U.S. House in '92, and they actually put me on the debate stage with the Democrat and Republican, and we drew straws. I was in the middle, so I had the Democrat, Republican.
Wow.
Who were trading barbs, just like just like Biden and Trump, although not quite as bad. And the newspaper the next day called me a rose between two thorns.
I can imagine. I've had people call me way too practical, doctor, and I get it. I feel that you're doing the same thing. Practicality doesn't seem to always win out, which is really silly. Talk to me. I want to get through, before we have to end off, a few more of these points. Foreign policy. What's your stance?
Militarily wise, it would be to bring the troops home, turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. Trade-wise, it would be free trade to allow people to trade with whoever they wanted, so that people get the best prices.
Any barrier to any tariffs, anything to avoid losing jobs? That's a big thing that's in the press, is losing jobs overseas.
Well, you mean losing jobs to companies overseas?
To China. No. Well, like, you're going to manufacture out of China or Mexico or Vietnam.
Well, first of all, here's one thing that Trump started doing in the right direction was reducing the corporate income tax so that people
Mhm.
would find it advantageous to stay here. I would put an income tax of 0 on corporations. And by the way, corporations don't pay income taxes anyway. They
Mhm.
pass it along to the consumer. So we bring it to 0 and hopefully bring the people home. But you know what? If China can do one particular industry better, cheaper, then we gain from lower prices and we simply go into other businesses where we make other money doing other things.
Fair enough. National debt. I personally preach. I've even written a book, drove around the country in 2016 about this. It's a big issue for me. I think that the country collapses from our overspending eventually. I think that's how this country comes down. What's your stance? What would you do about the national debt and our budget deficits that we run almost all the time? There's only been, I think, 8 times in I don't know how many years we've ever had a surplus.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And when I ran in 1996, the debt was $5 trillion, and I was going around the country saying, $5 trillion, how are we ever going to get out of it? And now it's 5 times that, 25 trillion. So you're absolutely right. We got to stop it. We got to get out of debt. And the first thing is if you're digging a hole, the first thing you do is stop digging. So we got to start balancing our budgets. We got to start cutting spending. You just have to do it.
Constitutional amendment to balance the budget?
Um, I guess I'd be in favor of that. Sure. I mean, I don't, I can't imagine. I guess the only concern would be if we were in an act of war.
Right.
However, by bringing the troops home, I'm hoping to prevent war. So, but here's the problem: is you put something in to try to help situations. Like, for instance, you might say, okay, we're going to put an exception. So if we're in a war, we absolutely have to defend ourselves. So then what do? Well, now they start creating wars all around the country because now they've got a loophole.
Right.
So it's just so hard to put anything like that in
I
there.
agree. And if we had a constitutional amendment, we would have to have something like that. I don't know how you'd police it. Personally, I think one of the probably the error by the founders in our Constitution is allowing public officials who are elected to control the purse strings, because simply what you're going to do is pour out money to the people so you get reelected. So that if there's an error, that I think is just outrageous, and I think it will take us down. And no one said we are going to live forever. That's the other thing. We got to continue fighting for this country. I mean, they don't all last. You look at Egypt, you look at even Great Britain, their empire is gone, and doesn't mean we're going to stay. A couple more taxes.
Well, actually, I'm already a couple minutes
Oh,
past, I think, our
okay.
endpoint. But I would like to. You made a comment very quickly, and I just wanted to highlight it. Yeah, so many Americans think that because this is America, we can't possibly fall. Like somehow because we're Americans, the law of gravity doesn't apply to us. But it is. Gravity is gravity, and economics is, it's going to apply to us. And if we don't do something, we are going to be in trouble. We're not immune just because we're Americans. So that's an excellent point.
Absolutely. Well, for more information on Dr. Jorgensen and her campaign, go to Joe20, an incredible domain name, jo20.com. I can't believe that. That's a great one. And the Libertarian Party is at lp.org. Doctor, thank you for taking the time. I know you're campaigning. I wish you luck. Continue fighting. Get the word out. We do need other choices. And it was a real honor to be able to talk to you. Thank you.
Oh, so grateful for you to have me. Thanks, and have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Well, that was Dr. Joe Jorgensen, the Libertarian Presidential Candidate here in 2020, running as a third-party candidate, of course. What is wrong with getting some of that information out there? Someone tell me that. Being way too practical in the world doesn't seem to necessarily pay off in this case, because it doesn't form. Here's what I've learned, because I got to tell you, my show a lot of time is not that controversial, and I've thought, oh, I should be right, or I should be left, or whatever I should be, and be out there and really conspiracy and run it, Maybe I should do that because I'm going to get a whole slew more followers. But I've learned, and I think this is the case with libertarians, anybody that's really practical, is that doesn't form a very good battle. The drama of social media and the mainstream media is the battle is all about the battle, the drama. If you don't have drama, again, I've talked about this. If you got, hey, man and wife doing well, they're happy, they're having good kids, they're doing fine, no problems here, no one's going to read that story. But man chops off wife's head, puts it in the freezer, and all the kids are up in the attic almost dying. That's a story everybody has to hear about. So when you're too practical, and probably what's happening here with the libertarians, that's a little bit too practical. I'm not sure I go with everything they have to say, but I like a lot of what they have to say. I think it actually adds to the conversation. I definitely think that the government is too big. I think they're too intrusive in our life. So I would say, if anything, that's the problem. But the mainstream media is not going to let that happen. This is a great battle. When you have two, it's perfect to have a battle and a battle. Two gladiators going at each other. And they want to make sure it's really even, because if it gets too much, Republicans are dominating too much, Democrats dominating too much, well, there's no game anymore. There's nothing to really worry about. So this is how they make their money. This is how, and this is what, honestly, you and I are the ones. We can't blame social media, and we can't blame mainstream media. We get what we do. We get what we have. We get what we deserve, folks. I hate to say that. We're the ones on social media. We're the ones buying and watching mainstream media. So it's on us. We have the system, I hate to say this, that we deserve, because we are the ones that are causing it to happen. If we didn't tune in to CNN or Fox or read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and read all this crap, they wouldn't be there. If we weren't on social media just going, oh, I got to say this on Facebook or Twitter, it wouldn't be happening. It's on us. So I appreciate her being on. You can, again, go to joe20.com. Great URL, jo20.com, and Libertarian Party, go to lp.org. If you got something to say it, communicate, write to them, write to that darn presidential bipartisan debate committee. There's no reason we couldn't have, lower the bar, 10%, maybe 7%. I agree, we don't want 20 people on the stage, but let's make the bars 5%. And then if they don't cut it, then the next one. I mean, let's come on. We got to do better than that, because our country literally, look, if you're going down the road, this is what I say. If you're going down the road and it's not working and it's getting worse, then you got to change your road. It's not working. Let's go to this road. Well, this road, no, we got to stay on this road. It has lots of potholes, and we're going to spend and overspend a lot. We're going to have lots of debt, and we're just going to go into debt, and we're going to just fight people, and we're going to have all sorts of problems, and we're going to run over a bunch of citizens, and we're not going to always have great justice, and people are going to be upset, and there's going to be some rioting. There's come on. What if we went down? I just honestly believe that we could get a president. I think we could get a system that could work for probably 75 to 80% of the people in the country. I really believe that. I don't think it has to be exclusive over here, exclusive over there. So again, thank you to Joe Jorgensen. I appreciate you coming on. And if you do nothing else, in 2 weeks from today, go out and vote if you haven't already done so through your mail-in ballot. Thanks very much for watching the Sean Burke Show. You can always write me at heysean@seanburke.net. Take care of yourself, be well, and let's continue trying to make this country a bit better. Bye-bye.